Hi, Dr. Ifland, and welcome to the Truth About Weight Loss Summit. Thanks so much for being here.
Oh, hi, Chef AJ. Thank you for having me.
It's always a pleasure because I consider you, if not the world's leading expert, certainly one of them on processed food addiction, something that a lot of people still don't believe exists.
Well, it's a little bit late for that. We have an entire textbook, 240,000 words built on 2,000 studies. The obesity researchers are actually eliminating aspects of the addiction all the time. It's over. The debate is over.
So processed food addiction is real.
It's real, and it's harming hundreds of millions of people around the world unknowingly. Yeah.
How would you define processed food addiction?
So there are two ways to define it. One is by the behaviors. And the most common addictive behaviors are you have tried to cut back and you've failed. You have a plan not to use and you eat it anyway. You eat it in spite of knowing that you shouldn't. You're eating more of it now than you used to. It takes up a lot of time, thinking, planning, getting, recovering, and cravings. So those are 6 out of the 11 signs. If you have those, it only takes 6 out of 11 to have a severe case. The other way you define addiction is by what's going on in the brain. If you have hyperactive reward system brain cells, hyperactive stress, hyperactive movement, and hypoactive, not enough activity in the frontal lobe, then that's the brain structure of addiction.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how long has this disease existed?
Well, I think if you go, where it really got told is in the early 1900s when steel rollers were introduced into flour mills. And then you could pulverize the grains fine enough that the body absorbs it quickly enough that you get a high. And once you have refined a plant to the point where it can get you high, then you have an addiction potential because it's followed by a crash. The crash is painful and people will be using compulsively to get out of the crash.
You know, I first became aware of your work many years ago because of your book, Sugars and Flours, How They Make Us Crazy, Sick, and Fat. And a lot of people, whether they use sugar or not, to any degree, they just can't imagine that flour could be a problem.
Yes, but it really is, especially gluten-containing flours. In the book Wheat Belly by William Davis, he describes Rockefeller getting interested in creating a wheat plant that would be more productive. So as they did the hybridization of that plant, more kernels, shorter, thicker stalk to hold the kernels, I don't think they realized it, but they were vastly increasing the gluten content. And gluten is a natural morphine. Gluten has gluteomorphine in it. And as they increased the gluten content of the wheat in the 1930s and 40s, it became addictive.
Right. So there's a big difference between eating a whole grain like millet than eating flour.
Totally. You cook the grain as little as possible. It takes a while for it to break down and be digested. Millet is a gluten-free grain. It's a completely different experience.
Right. I think people have problems with that because they're thinking no bread, no pasta. I mean, bread is the staff of life.
Yes. So bread, the staff of life, became a phrase in biblical times. So we're talking 2000 and before. And I'll tell you, they did not have powdered flour. Some poor person had to sit there with a stone and grind that wheat until it would break apart enough that they could add some water and put it on a hot stone and make something that could be carried, a portable food. That's a far cry from these highly refined products that are in the stores today.
It seems like the more highly refined the product, the more potential for the addiction.
Yes, this is very true. So particularly refined carbohydrates, the the measure of addiction is how fast does that substance reach the brain. We know, for example, that sugar reaches the brain. Sugar, fat, and salt reach the brain faster than any addictive drug, half a second. And this is as compared to cocaine, which might be 10 seconds, or alcohol, which might be 20 minutes. The faster the substance reaches the brain, the more addictive it is. So these are highly addictive substances. We have a lot of research showing that sugar is more addictive than cocaine. Even artificial sugars, artificial sweeteners. Rats will choose an artificial sweetener over cocaine or heroin.
Wow. Yeah, I appreciate that you understand that it's not just sugar, that it's sugar, fat, salt, caffeine, artificial sweeteners, dairy.
And dairy. Dairy has 4 different casomorphines. It's designed to put a 100-pound baby cow to sleep so that that baby cow will absorb the nutrients from the mother's milk. It's not designed for humans. It's a narcotic, basically.
Right.
And I just saw, I'm glad you brought up dairy. I'm glad we're talking about dairy. Just as I was doing research for something else, I have now found study number 2 showing that dairy is associated with a shorter life. The greater the dairy consumption, the shorter the life. 2 different studies, one in Sweden, where it was a survey, and how much dairy do you eat, and then how long did that person live. But the second one is from Iran, and it was of school children. How much dairy do you eat? And then they got in and measured the telomeres at the end of their DNA. The more dairy, the shorter the telomere. 2 completely different studies, same conclusion. Dairy is associated with a shorter life.
Right. 'Cause I don't think people realize dairy is a processed food. People aren't, milking the cow and drinking it. Dairy is a highly processed food.
Well, it's highly processed because it's homogenized and all that. But the cow processes it. The cow is processing grass or whatever horrible things they feed dairy cows into breast milk. Yeah, it's a processed food right out of the cow, raw, right out of the cow. It's a processed food.
And like you said, it's meant to put a baby cow to sleep. It's also meant for that cow's baby. Human beings are the only species that drink milk from another species, or even drink milk after weaning.
Bizarre. And there is this wonderful researcher in Germany. His name is Odo Melnick. And he has done work on what genes does dairy turn on. It's breast cancer, it's prostate cancer, it's acne, it's weight gain, of course, as you might imagine. It's just not a fit for humans.
Thank you so much for saying that, because many of the people in the food addiction space basically are just bashing sugar, but I love how you take all the addictive substances.
Yes. I know that when I got off of sugar and flour 26 years ago, 1996, there was dairy on my food plan, my recovery food plan, 2 servings a day. And it made me sick. It made me brain fogged and tired and depressed. And now it's just like, I think it's worse than sugar.
Yeah. Well, it has milk sugar in it, lactose. So it
has lactose. It has a little bit of salt in it. It has fat, of course. And when you take the fat out and you make skim milk, you're speeding up the absorption of the lactose. So you're actually making it more addictive.
That's really funny. Interesting. Who is most vulnerable to the effects of processed food addiction?
It's people who watch television. It's people who have watched television as small children. It's people who got the addiction in childhood, which is most people. Because when big tobacco bought the big processed food processors in the mid-1980s, big tobacco bought Kraft, Nabisco, General Foods in the space of 3 years. They brought their addiction business model with them. And this is the 5 A's. I call it the 5 A's. You know, I have an MBA way back in my past. I'm very interested in business models. The 5 A's of the addiction business model. The first one is attack young age of onset. The younger the child, the more different substances, the less likely it is that that person will be able to beat the addiction. So young age of onset. And when you see tobacco coming into processed foods, you see the number of Saturday morning cartoon commercials for these highly addictive substances go from already 150 in one Saturday morning to like 550 in the space of 7 years. And you see Nickelodeon carrying those commercials to 65 million American households. It's like, duh, within 10 years, childhood obesity has increased by 15%, from 10% to 15% of children. And then you lay on the advertising, you lay on the availability, you make it very affordable. And then you hire somebody like Howard Moskowitz to hide massive amounts of addictive substances in the food. That's what he went around to all the corporations to do, is to put the maximum amount of sugar, fat, salt into the food before the consumer could detect it and reject the product. So that's a business model. And I just hope that all of your viewers will just feel that guilt lifting. Just lift that guilt right off of you. You were manipulated by master addiction merchants. They perfected this model in tobacco. They brought it straight over to children. That's why juice boxes are the same shape and color as cigarette packs. It's diabolical.
It's incredible because we know that people used to use sugar back in the day, you know, a teaspoon here or there kind of as a condiment. But now, like you said, they hide it in places that don't even need sugar, you know, salad dressing, ketchup, bread, things that historically can be and have been made without a half a cup of sugar.
It's just, it's so clear what the strategy was and the ruthlessness with which the processed food manufacturers put it into place.
Well, I hope one day they'll be held accountable just the way the tobacco industry was.
Well,
they are the tobacco industry.
So. I hope so.
But in a way, they are the tobacco industry because Philip
They
Morris,
are the tobacco. It's just an extension of the tobacco industry.
and so they knew what they were doing.
The thing that I think is so interesting about the timing on this is that high fructose corn syrup came into the market in about 1980. So that solved the problem of affordability, because before that they had to depend on another group of drug dealers, the sugar cartel in Florida. So once they got out from under that, the next thing that happened was the dietary guidelines. And there they are. They must have just fallen out of their chairs, although they probably engineered it, when they saw that the federal government not only was not going to be prosecuting them in court, but they were actually going to be advertising these refined carbohydrates. Oh, it must have been like they couldn't race to their bankers fast enough to start buying these processed food manufacturers.
You know, it's interesting that you said high fructose corn syrup was about 1980, because that's when the obesity rates really started rising.
Absolutely.
And from some of the other doctors on this summit is that sugar's not great, but fructose is even worse.
It converts to fat 2.5 times more efficiently than sugar. And so you've got fatty liver, you've got fatty pancreas, and then your body can't filter anymore and can't regulate insulin. It's just, we're being killed from the inside out. 1 million Americans every 2 years die.
And it's put in baby formula. And if a mother can't breastfeed, it's basically her child becomes addicted at day one.
Yes, and so the way I hope that you will cover this. I think you're planning to cover this. But also in the 1980s, the World Health Organization got regulation of baby formula passed, and these corporations are so powerful that these regulations are not being enforced. So we do have really heinous things. Like the baby formula manufacturer will give free samples to mothers in the hospital in third world countries. And so the mother is told, oh, this is more healthy than breast milk. She uses it, and her milk doesn't come in. Her own milk dries up before she's even left the hospital. So now she's too poor to buy baby formula, and there she is, stuck buying baby formula. It's heinous. It's heinous.
Unbelievable. And she herself might have had a problem with sugar even before giving birth in some cases, right? The mother?
We do have a very startling evidence that if a mother is eating processed foods while pregnant, the baby will be born with metabolic syndrome because the blood that is reaching the fetus has too much sugar in it. And so the baby will already have a hyperactive pancreas, for example.
That's incredible. So many people feel like that you can't say that food is addictive because we have to eat. And one of the things I once heard you say, which I remembered, was that when you're eating for reasons outside of hunger, that's not eating, that's drug use.
That is drug use, yes. So if you're eating because you're tired, because you're irritable, because you're anxious, because you're depressed, if you're eating because you are afraid you're going to hit somebody, which happens, that's not eating. That's not food use. That's consuming a drug orally. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's one of the criteria, which is why are you doing that? You're facing withdrawal. So withdrawal is one of the 11 signs that you're addicted to something. And what you're doing is you're avoiding withdrawal. If you're eating for a reason other than hunger, you're putting off withdrawal. Maybe you have a headache, and if you eat, if you drink caffeine or something, it'll stop the headache. That's withdrawal avoidance.
That's such an interesting way to phrase it because it's never, it's never arugula that they eat outside of hunger.
It's turning to arugula. No.
That is really something. So how do we recover?
Well, if you would like, we can go through what it takes to recover from not just a severe addiction, but a very complicated addiction in a very oppressive environment. Like the government is just standing by, letting all this happen. Really, there's so much wheat and corn grown in the United States, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture is charged with making sure that it all gets sold. Americans are eating almost twice the number of calories they need, and the part the double is sugar and gluten-containing flour. So there's the U.S. government charged with making sure it all gets sold. Well, the only way you can sell that much extra food is through addiction. So now Rob Lustig just said it in his book, Metabolical. Okay, so maybe the USDA isn't killing us, but they're standing by while we die.
Yeah, that's something. Well, I'd love to know how we can help people.
All right, so let's do the slides. And Chef AJ, I just can't tell you how grateful I am to you for covering this topic. So before we begin the slides, could I just say that I put together these slides for the primary purpose of relieving people from the guilt of failing in other programs. Other programs that don't recognize the addiction are not going to work. They're broken from conception, and you're about to see why. So just feel that guilt lifting from your shoulders. Here we go. So these are the 20 must-haves. I have had an online recovery community now for 4 years. We are celebrating our 4th anniversary. And this is what I have learned. These are all the things that I've added over those 4 years. And I'm going to say that if you are missing any one of them, your program could suffer. So it's complete support. Processed food addiction is highly complex, requires a lot of skills. And incomplete support, incomplete training is just going to prolong the suffering. It's not your fault. So here's what you need. This is what you need to be looking for. So 5 basic categories. Knowledge of research. There's a ton of research on processed food addiction. The researchers think they're looking at obesity or eating disorders or drug addiction, but they're actually describing addiction to processed foods. How to manage a food supply, how to manage lapsing, because we've got the food industry constantly provoking us into lapsing. How do you recover from that? How do you create a stress-free environment? Because stress is a big addiction trigger. And how do you identify leadership? We all need somebody to follow. We need a well-educated leader. Okay, so what am I talking about? Research-based, you've got to know the story of big tobacco, because that explains then what we need to do to protect ourselves. We have to understand how conformance drive works, and we have to know why we're doing this for a lifetime. So why do I say research-based? You've got to avoid whimsical advice. There are people out there who don't have a good grounding and they just make things up. They write scripts, they teach other people their scripts. They're not the right thing. You've got to be able to look at a study. You've got to be able to say, these are the results that we're working from. Science does show us what is real, and this is how you get guidance that actually works. So this is a quote. This is a colleague of mine. Her name is Jamie Morgan, and she's in a leadership position in a hospital system. And I said, well, Jamie, if you didn't know the research, how would it affect your recovery? She said, I'd be lost. I'd be lost in blame, shame, and guilt. And that's what my doctors have always told me, that it's my fault. If I didn't know the research, I'd be stuck there. Okay, so you've got to know the story of big tobacco, because this is how you focus your defense. This is how you focus and organize your protection. There are corporations out there that know how to bombard us with messaging that actually wires our brain cells to crave and control behavior. So if you know that, if you know how those corporations work, then you know how to avoid their messaging and keep yourself from craving. So this is yet another route to relieving yourself from blame. This overeating is something that was done to you deliberately by the big tobacco corporations as they came in and bought processed food in the mid-1980s. So again, Jamie says, if I didn't know about these corporate business practices, I would go on assuming it was my laziness or lack of willpower. It's none of those things. The program must engage conformance drive. You must be on screen with healthy people long enough to get a part of your brain called mirror neurons to copy the people on that screen. Because frontal lobe is not working too well in an addicted brain. The addicted brains are being dominated by the reward systems. You've got to go to your mirror neurons to control behavior, to stop the addicted brain cells from controlling behavior. If you're around members who are struggling, I have to say I was in a meeting once where there were 20 people struggling and one person who was successful. I would not have been successful in that program. So Jamie says, if I didn't have successful people to copy, I wouldn't be able to develop new routines and mindsets on my own. This is just basic brain functioning. It's just the way the brain works. And we have to know that this is for a lifetime. Whatever program you go into, it's got to be priced so that you can join it for a lifetime, and it's got to be available, so easily available that you can access it for a lifetime. Why? Because as soon as you stop the messaging from your recovery program, you're going to be exposed to the food industry messaging, and you'll be right back where you started. So look for long-term programs. Jamie says, if my program came to an end, everything I had built would come to an end too. I'd feel isolated and alone, and that's highly stressful. So you just fall right back into the grip of the addiction. All right, let's talk about meal management. This is getting worse over time. The likelihood that you're going to find clean, non-addictive food out there in the environment is growing weaker and weaker. Give yourself lots of time. If the program says, oh, you've got to be doing this immediately or you're not a good citizen, they don't understand how long it could take a couple of years to build a meal production routine. You need the freedom to talk about it, no forced foods, and celebrate all the victories of this food plan. So time and training, it does take a long time to organize meals. And because we are withdrawing from so many different substances, sugar, all the sweeteners, flour, gluten, salt, dairy, processed fats, caffeine, food additives, you could take a couple of years to withdraw from all of those substances. They're violently addictive. And you need a lot of time to do a lot of rotation to find out what food plan is going to work for you best, and to make sure that you're in an environment that really supports unprocessed foods. So there are programs out there that traumatize members who don't get their meals organized according to the program's time schedule, and you just got to avoid that like the plague. And make sure that you're in a program that has all the addictive substances out. Okay, so Jamie says, if I were in a program that required me to organize my meals too quickly, I would quit. I wouldn't be able to do it, and I couldn't stand the thought of failing in front of all those people. I'd just quit. It's important that you have all the time in the world to get your food routine organized. Members need to be able to talk, and be cherished and respected no matter what is going on with them. This is detailed. It's a lot of moving parts. It takes time, and lapsing is painful. Everything that you should say should be met with understanding and compassion. You must have understanding and compassion. So if you're in a program that says, oh, you lapse, you can't talk, that's damaging. That's not going to work. Silencing a member is humiliating. And you need to be able to talk about everything, not just the food. The food is just I call it the tail of the dog. The dog has to be happy. Your relationships, your media, your messaging, your exercise, all of that has to be going well. And then the food will be happy. The food will take care of itself and that tail will wag. So Jamie says, what would have happened if I had been in a program that silenced me when I lapsed? I'd be the darkest, saddest version of myself, separated, ashamed, to just face first back in the food. You have to be in a program that does not force you to eat any food. Food allergies are rampant. They're very closely associated with processed foods. You have to have control over your food. You have to be in a program that gives you a method for figuring out your best food plan. You have to be respected for what you choose, for your process and where you are in your process. And then you get the training. You have to have training in how to pull meals together, because you're going to be pulling a lot of meals together. So Jamie says, if I were forced to eat foods I didn't like or that I was allergic to, I might do it for a few days, or I might even hang on longer and white knuckle it, but I would be miserable and I would quit. So the only way to stay safe from processed foods for a lifetime is to stay in your uplifting program for a lifetime. Now, this is something that makes me just crazy. these programs that only celebrate weight loss. You're getting your brain to work. You're getting all the organs in your body to work. Your energy is coming back, your mental clarity. It's just like there are so many cool things happening, and you need to be able to talk about them all. Weak programs only reward your abstinence, or they ignore the fact that processed foods are harming us in over 100 ways. You have to be motivated by these just daily, sometimes hourly victories. Like you notice that you're more energetic, or you notice that you stay calm while somebody else gets upset. The number of just very amazing, wonderful things is endless. This is a way to keep us lifted up and moving forward. So I asked Jamie, I said, what if the only thing that you ever talked about was abstinence and weight loss? She would say, I would begin to define myself that way. It would be depressing, and I would quit. So lapse management, when we understand how severe the addiction is and how much training we need to fend off the food industry, we also know we need training in how to get back after a lapse. We need realistic expectations about how long it's going to take for lapsing to stop. We need training in cue management, trigger management, before we can expect to stop lapsing. We need to stop the self-blame. So realistic expectations, it could take years. Research on drug addiction recovery, which is not really drug addiction recovery, it's really drug addiction transference to processed foods, 5 years. 5 years before you have a year of abstinence. So you need compassion for lapsing, never judgment. And when you get compassion, the emotional impact of the lapse is reduced, and you're much more likely to be able to come back out of it. We've developed a method in our program where we attach the pain of the lapse right to the lapse, so that as soon as you start thinking about lapsing, the pain will come up, and it's a pretty effective deterrent. So we just take the upset out of the lapse. No more upsetting than a mosquito bite. Just move on, and just remember the pain so that you're less likely to lapse again. So Jamie says, if I were expected to stop lapsing on some weirdo, unrealistic schedule, I would lapse more often. It would just be too stressful. Cue management, this is just almost all programs are missing this. This is the reason we lapse. There's a tremendous amount of research showing that a cue, a trigger, a message, stimulation, reminder, could be a smell, a sound, a sight, even an associative cue. Oh, I used to binge with that person. I see that person. Now I feel like binging. It's where the lapse starts. It's not in your childhood issues, as painful as they may be. It's not because you lack willpower, and it's not because you're self-sabotaging. It's because the food industry has stimulated you in some way. So it takes a long time to get the hang of that and to start to measure how much cueing can I tolerate before I'm going to lapse. And that's, you need training in that. And someplace to talk about it. Cueing is very mysterious unless you hear other people talking about their responses to it. Plenty of time, you need plenty of time for this training. And it's a skill-based training. It's a skill of avoiding cueing. And also, you've got to give your household members time to learn how to stop triggering you. And yes, that is their responsibility. If you want to quit smoking, no, the household members don't get to keep smoking in the house. It's a respect thing. Okay, so Jamie says, if I didn't know how to manage cues, I would be blaming myself for the wrong things, and I'd be doing the wrong things to make myself stop. Okay, and then stop the self-blame. This is so important. If you're blaming yourself, it's painful, and the pain will drive you right back into lapsing. So the science is really important here. The science tells you what's going on in your brain, and it's not because you have some kind of weakness. It's because the food industry was allowed to give you an addiction. Okay, and then all the time in the world. You just need to be able to take this very, very slowly. So Jamie says, if I blamed myself for lapses, I would give up, because I would be lapsing and thinking I'm a failure. So why should I keep trying? Stress-free environments are important. Stress, along with cueing, is a leading cause of lapsing. If you are in a program that stresses you out in any way, the program is making you worse. So we feel like, because this starts in childhood, that means that all 100 billion brain cells in our head were formed in an addicted brain. The addiction can start at the moment of conception if the parents are using processed foods. That very first DNA duplication will happen in an addictive way. So how are you going to reprogram 100 billion brain cells? It's immersion. You've got to be able to reach somebody and release stress between meetings, talk about any problem, and you have to have your own control over time, pacing, etc. So frequent meetings release a wonderful chemical called oxytocin. Your feel-good pathways in your brain might not be working too well, but oxytocin will come on and actually regulate dopamine release. It's very, very cool. So this is a great way to stop cravings. It's a great way to feel better, being online all the time. And the more exposure you get to healthy people, the more your mirror neurons are going to drive you to do healthy things. So get into a program where you can get into meetings all the time. We have right now 15 hours a day, 365 days a year of meetings. And then we have a big library of workshops that can fill in the blanks. This is much better than residential treatment. Residential treatment, you associate recovery with the treatment facility. You're around sick people, so you're learning how to be a sick person. You come home, your home is the biggest relapse trigger. You come home and within days you're lapsing again. Residential treatment does not work. Residential treatment inside your home works great. So Jamie says, if I didn't have lots of meetings, whenever something happened, I would find an excuse not to be there. It's got to be easy to connect between meetings. You can't wait for a meeting to resolve a stressful situation. The cravings will just overtake you. And Jamie says, if I didn't have someone to talk to, I'd be left to my own devices, thoughts, rationalizations. In other words, I'd be in the grips of the addiction. Craving prevention. So craving prevention, how do you calm a craving brain? You are around people who know how to do it, who have thought control. Thought control. This is how you stop an addiction. So if I didn't have a personal craving management program, I would think that if I were craving, I was failing, and then I would quit. So you have to be in a program that does not have any deadlines. They just can't be in a program where you have to do things. As soon as somebody tells you you have to do something and you have to do it by a certain time, your stress, fear of failure will kick in and you'll be lapsing. So you have to be in a program where you have control over what you choose to do next and when you're going to do it. So we say, wait until your own voice of wisdom comes on in your head and says, you know what, I think I'm ready to try that. That is the way to move forward. we have a big problem in eating disorder recovery in that practitioners will no longer tell their clients to get off these bad foods. They said, well, as soon as I tell them, they start binging on it. So you need to be honest, absolutely clear. You've got to have a clean food plan. You've got to have the whole list, because otherwise they're going to spend the rest of their lives transferring the addiction from one substance to the next. That is on the one hand. As you give them that list, I'm begging my members, I'm begging you, just take your time. You never have to give up a food. Wait until your own voice says that you're ready to try this. Because I know that if they get the idea that they have to give up those foods, they will binge. It's got to be so respectful. We have to really understand what's going on. So Jamie says, if I didn't have control, I'd feel forced, rushed, stressed, and I'd be lapsing. So the leadership, you've got to look at the leadership of the program. Do they have expertise? Are they strength building? Are they stress-free? Are they offering visions and not goals? And are they focused also on restoring brain function? The kind of expertise I'm talking about is research and compassion. Do they know how to speak with pure compassion? You just can't have this amateur advice. Well, I did it this way, so you should. No. The way you did it will not work for anybody else but you. So it's a lot of training. This is a very, very complex addiction. So if I had to depend on amateur leaders, I'd be confused, skeptical, misled. I'd be failing and blaming myself. So this is very important. The leaders have to be, this is just for me, this is my observation, totally focused on the members' strengths. How strong are you? How well you did that? That was so powerful. You are a true warrior for wellness. I really admire you. That was impressive what you did. So the leader's got to be able to recognize the victories and pull them out and show the member, you are strong, you are in control, you are powerful, you have agency. This is very opposite of the character defect approach to building up somebody. It's so sad. And I had somebody say to me recently, I was taught to hate myself into recovery. But now what's successful is I am loving myself into recovery. You will take care of somebody that you love, somebody that you like. So self-loving, self-liking is the core. It turns out self-kindness is the pathway to control, because you like yourself and you want to take care of yourself. So you've got to have leaders who can see your strengths and describe them to you. The culture is all about denying us our strengths so that we pay attention to advertisers. All right, so if I were required to dwell on my character defects, I would just be depressed. I would define myself as defective. Everybody's telling me I'm defective. Okay, I'm defective. It's not a nice life to be dwelling on your defects all the time. So stress-free environments, if people are criticizing you, if they're judging you, if they're telling you you're a failure, that will lead you straight back to the food. It's got to be stress-free. Okay, so Jamie says, if my recovery program were stressful, I'd be trying to fit in, but the stress would be leading me back to the addiction. Visioning, this is something that's so important. People can develop visions of how they would like to be. This is very, very different from goal setting. You set a goal, you are bringing on the stress, the anticipation of disappointment, of failure, and shame. But if you gently create, you're just creating a vision, you're answering this question, what kind of person would I rather be? Then it comes up from the foundations of your soul, and you can do this. you've got to be in a program that does not have deadlines. So Jamie says, if I had deadlines, it would detract from my peace of mind and I would be failing. I can make progress as long as I can do it at my own pace. Cognitive restoration, we know the frontal lobe has been deprived of blood flow, and there are ways to bring that back online. Memory, learning, decision-making, attention span, impulse control, those are all frontal lobe. And you can do exercises to stimulate that part of the brain and get your cognitive function back. You've got to be in a program that knows how to do that. Okay, so Jamie says, if I didn't have cognitive function, I would be overwhelmed and I would be quitting. Okay, so here they are. Here are all 20 of the must-haves, and you need each one of them. This is a highly complex addiction. It's taken me 26 years to realize how important each one of these is. This is where you can get more information on our program, processedfoodaddiction.com, or get help at foodaddictionreset.com. Oh, just Chef AJ, thank you so much for letting me share that.
Thank you. I took a few notes, and one of the things that really stood out, because one of the other speakers talked about this, about self-love, is you can't hate yourself into recovery.
No, ma'am. If you're in a program that is teaching you that you're failing, you never get this, what's wrong with you, that program is trying to get you to hate yourself into recovery. It's sad. It not only does it not work, but gosh, it's painful.
You know, so many people, Dr. Ifland, wanting to go on a diet, they're looking for a quick fix. But if I understand you correctly, addiction doesn't respond to quick fixes.
It makes it worse. So if you are on a diet and you don't have enough calories, for example, you're waking up another part of your brain. You're waking up the fear of famine brain. And that now you have a double whammy. You have a hyperactive fear of famine, food-seeking brain, and you've got the addiction. It's not nice. You have to eat full meals.
Yeah. But I love how you said that you have to have a recovery plan that doesn't include addictive substances for you. I see so many plans, like you say, that allow dairy, that allow stevia, that allow caffeine, excessive, and they take out, yes, it's great to take out sugar, and it's great to take out sugar and flour, but they're still drinking alcohol. And I don't think people really fully understand the addiction model the way you describe it.
Yeah, it's so easy to transfer an addiction. And even as you're coming off the processed foods, your leadership should be expert enough to be watching for relationship addiction or porno addiction or gambling addiction or shopping addiction. It's very easy to transfer an addiction. And the corporations are out there with their addiction scientists promoting this all the time.
I love how you said that households should respect those in recovery, because this is what I see as one of the biggest problems. And as you talked about cues in the environment, you mentioned how if somebody was quitting smoking, you wouldn't necessarily tell the family members they had to quit smoking, but they can't smoke in the house. But with these processed foods, I see so many, it's usually the woman, sometimes it's the man, but it's usually the woman who, well, my husband won't eat this way and my kid won't eat this way. And they still have to go out and buy this hyper palatable crap and make food with it. And then they wonder why they can never recover because they're living in a 7-Eleven.
Yes. And this is something that I think is really important, that you know the truth about these processed ingredients. I am working on a presentation right now of the 8 ways. It's based on some material from Rob Lustig's Metabolical book, the 8 ways that processed foods attack cell function, how they immobilize cells, how they paralyze cells, how they cause cell death. These are not substances that that you would ever give somebody. No.
I love how you said that in many of the eating recovery programs, they're trying to teach people to moderate these, and then they blame themselves for failing. We have a binge expert on this summit who says, no, you can't moderate those foods.
No, you can't. You don't want to. It would be like saying, okay, good. You've gone from a pack of cigarettes to half a pack. That's great. Let's just stop right there. Oh, no, no, no. You would want to keep whittling that down until they were safe. It's very, because there's so many different substances, and the industries are so good at deception. These are the same people that tried to successfully persuade us that cigarettes were sexy. Can you imagine anything more repulsive than a cigarette?
I'm shocked every time I see somebody smoke. I'm like, really? That's still a thing. It shocks me. So many people say that the reason that they're overweight today is they had childhood trauma or abuse. And again, we're not trying to diminish that in any way, but you said it's not your childhood issues. Could you please elaborate on that?
Well, suppose you're a heavy drinker and you're an alcoholic and you go in to get therapy. Therapists will not work with an alcoholic while they're still drinking. And it's because you don't know what behavior is being driven by the alcohol versus the childhood trauma. But yet they go in and they treat people with processed food addiction without getting their diets cleaned up. So how in the world can that therapist know whether that person is sobbing in their office because they're crashing off of a sugar high or because they've uncovered a childhood trauma? That is not a fair fight. And you've got to really work with that patient. And our message to therapists, to doctors, to dietitians, to nutritionists, to physical therapists, to nurses is simple. You need a surround support system for that patient. Yes, we want to work with you on food plans. We want to work with you on prescriptions. But the idea that you're going to take a severely addicted person and get them to a safe place with a once a week appointment or a once a month appointment, no, it's going to leave the practitioner frustrated. My heart breaks for practitioners who are being trained to believe that they can medicate or surgically alter a person. No, it's 100 billion brain cells that need reprogramming, rewiring, remessaging, and you're not going to do that in a once a week office visit, and you're not going to do that with surgery.
Right. It's interesting how you said at the beginning how when people are using these hyperpalatable foods as drugs, it's almost not to feel good anymore, but just to avoid the pain of the withdrawal.
Yes, that's the progression of addiction. You're not drinking anymore because you really enjoy it. It's because you will get the DTs in withdrawal. The pleasure has gone out of it. The liking has gone out of it. And wanting has come in to take its place. It's a miserable life.
Yeah. How long does it take for someone to detox or withdraw from processed food and to have these cravings go away? I know they can always be reignited by cues.
Yes.
But if they're in a clean environment and in a program, how long does that serious detox where they're really miserable take?
It's 4 to 8 days, sometimes 10, and sometimes you might have a resurgence of strong emotions, day 14, day 23. But as long as you're in a program and you can go in and talk about it, it will take the agony of it away. And this year, actually, I've learned about supplementation to reduce the agony of withdrawal. The agony, what I'm talking about typically is the bad headache. So there is supplementation. There are kind of recipes for supplements online. I'm not a nutritionist. I'm not licensed to recommend things, but there's 3 specific minerals that, as I understand it, this is outside of my area of expertise, the kidney will release those 3 minerals. You get a deficit of those 3 minerals, and you can just take them. Wow. And you'll avoid quite a bit of the worst of it.
That's great. So is it important to have a clean environment if one is recovering from an addiction?
We have excellent research showing that if your addicted brain knows that a food is available, it will be pumping out dopamine. you can't pay attention because your brain is filling with dopamine until finally there's so much dopamine in your head that you're doing what I call the zombie walk. You're going to get it. Your brain is screaming, no, 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 but your body is moving forward. It's because so much dopamine has built up from availability alone, that that can get control of your behavior. That's not you. That's not your frontal lobe. Frontal lobe has gone offline. It's a mechanical, chemical reaction to availability. So a clean home environment, even if you start getting triggered out in the real world, you can just you get home and then this is our peaceful place. This is where we have absolute control. All of that part of your brain will be triggered. You've got to have a kind of a sanctuary somewhere, a refuge.
I couldn't agree with you more. And the amount of time that people complain about how they can't get a clean environment, they could maybe learn techniques to negotiate that, because I think that it can be negotiated. Maybe it would take therapy or a counselor or something, but until one has had the benefit of a clean environment, I don't think they know how peaceful one can be. You always talk about that calm, stable brain. I think if I had to live amongst processed food, I wouldn't have been able to manage my food addiction and keep the weight off.
No, it's not. I love this topic because we are asking ourselves, what is reasonable? What is realistic? It's not realistic to stop lapsing if processed foods are piled up everywhere in your home. So it's one of the things when we say go at your own pace and talk about what your voice of wisdom wants to talk about. It may be that person has got to stand up to an emotionally abusive household member before they can even start thinking about a food plan. It may be that they have to work with their physician to get off some medications before they're going to be successful on a food plan. So the getting your food in order is just kind of on the list of things that need to be built up, and you need to build skills to execute those things over time, a long time. I've been in my recovery program now for 4 years. I'm still throwing off mean things that my parents said to me. And the more I throw those off, the more I like myself, the easier it is to maintain a clean food plan.
Thank you. The word conformance drive and mirror neurons might be new to some of our viewers. Could you kind of give a down and dirty definition of
Yes. This is something that's very, very surprising. I worked very hard for 22 years to find a way to reliably get people off of processed foods. It took me all those years to realize how severe the addiction is. And then January 1st, 2018, I said, okay, I know what Zoom is. We're going to have an all day long program, 7 days in a row on Zoom. And I don't know, I got 10 volunteers. I had a daily phone call. I got 10 volunteers from that program. And they had all been struggling. I'd had the daily phone call for maybe a year and a half. It wasn't enough. And there we were that very first day on Zoom. We came to the end of the day and I went around the room and I said, how did you do with your food today? I ate clean. I didn't think I could do it, but I did it. I've been trying to eat clean for 20 years. All the way around the room, everybody had eaten clean that day and I was shocked. I didn't know about mirror neurons. They're not in the textbook, but I went looking. I went looking for some explanation of why all of those people were able to eat clean on that very first day. It was conformance drive. Conformance drive, as it turns out, is the second most powerful system in the brain. The most powerful system is making our blood pump and our breathing. But right next to it is conformance drive. Like, what? How could that be? It is because if you believe in human evolution, not everybody does, but even if you think of this in creationist terms, it still makes sense. If you were in a tribe and you conformed to that tribe's way of doing things, you would live long enough to pass on your genes, to have children and pass on your genes. Why? Because it was the tribe that fought off predators and found food and found shelter and watched over children. If you were the kind of person who went off on your own, those hyenas were waiting for you. You would not survive long enough to have your own children. So the people wandering off, those genes did not get passed on. The people who would conform to a tribe, their genes got passed on. This is hardcore survival wiring in the brain. So the food industry just exploits this mercilessly. That's why you see commercials that have somebody sitting on the sofa eating bad food. Your conformist tribes have said, oh, we should sit on the sofa and eat bad food. It's diabolical. This is what I really like the way I think about mirror neurons. They will either kill you or they will cause you to thrive. And it depends 100% on who you are around. So if you're around people who are eating processed foods and you're beating yourself up because you can't stop, that's not your fault. Nobody's ever given you an alternative group of people to conform to. It doesn't mean you love those people any less. It just means that you've managed your mirror neuron, your conformance drive compulsion in a safe way. I eat what these people eat. I love these people over there in my household, but I eat the way these people eat. And that's crucial. And that does, so how does your conformance drive decide who to conform to? It's who you see most often and how well you know them.
We had one of the experts on the summit, Dr. Scott Stoll, talk about the obesity contagion, that you are your friends' behaviors, basically.
We do, and there's really strong, and it's relatively new research. I have a workshop called Catching Processed Food Addiction from Social Circles. This researcher went so far to say that if your social circle is not losing weight, you cannot lose weight.
Wow, that's profound. This summit is called The Truth About Weight Loss. And in addition to excess weight, what other effects do these processed and ultra-processed foods have on the brain and the body?
Oh gosh, they impair cell function. So every cell in the body is being impaired. Brain-wise, you will get the addiction that we talked about before, intense cravings, loss of control over behavior. You will also get that cognitive impairment, poor attention span learning, decision-making, impulse control, and memory. And you do see epidemics of all these things. Americans are eating over a pound per person per day of these highly toxic fattening substances. So you see epidemics of these things. It could be any organ, skin, heart, lungs, stomach. It could be any muscle group. It could be any endocrine. It could be thyroid. It could be pancreas. It could be all your reproductive organs. It could be skeleton. It causes, they're highly acidic. The stomach will neutralize the acidity by pulling calcium alkaline from the bone, so osteoporosis. It erodes cartilage, the cells in cartilage. This is why we have these epidemics of hip and knee replacement. And it accelerates aging. So it creates something called a glycated end product, and those build up inside of cells, and they make the cells inflexible. They prevent the mitochondria in the cell from functioning. So this is but you're touching on what's so fun. I know people are like, what? This is not fun. This is incredibly fun. All these things that your health professional told you are never going to go away, they go away. All these things that you didn't know you had, And people might have told you that you were slow or you had low IQ or you were not a good learner. Boom, all of a sudden you have this terrific IQ. You learn like crazy and you can pay attention for hours on end and your memory is sharp, 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 and you're making great decisions. Oh my gosh, all the pain goes away, the inflammation, the leaky gut, the stomach aches, the asthma. There are 144 diseases associated with processed foods. And the basic foundation for that is the processed foods gradually and painfully destroy cell function. They're that deep.
I believe you. Is there like an addiction severity index?
Yes. So the way the American Psychiatric Association has defined this is there are those 11 signs. We talked about six or seven of them. The more of those you have, the more severe the addiction. We have a self-quiz. It's not a diagnostic tool, but it'll give you an idea of whether you're experiencing the signs. And that self-quiz is right at the top of the services we offer at processedfoodaddiction.com. Six or more out of the 11 is considered to be a severe addiction.
Right. Thank you. You mentioned in one of your talks that I heard about waking up the food-seeking part of the brain.
Yeah.
How does one, because obviously a lot of people with processed food addiction do have excess weight that they need to lose. So how do they do that without waking up that part of the brain?
Well, you eat a lot of non-fattening foods. So you had another guest whom I just really admire, Barbara Rolls. And I didn't really believe this when I was listening to her, so of course I tried it out for myself. If you're eating a lot of like a leafy green, there's a big volume on your plate. This is really fun to try out. You will see that you are less hungry. And it's not a matter of calories. That's not how the brain computes whether you've had enough food. It's literally by the volume of it. So the way to lose weight and avoid, how do you wake up that brain? Not eating enough. So it is the one situation in which the conformance drive becomes the third most powerful part of the brain. And it's if you've woken up the food-seeking, fear of famine brain. So famine is a leading cause of death on the planet. Like a volcano could erupt and block out the sun for a couple of years. You would have tens of thousands of people dying of famine. Now, today, famine is used by political leaders. Mao used it to quell peasants in China. Stalin used it to quell peasants in Russia. It's horrible, and it's done. But famine is very much fear of famine is hardwired into the brain. If you're in a famine situation and you find food, this is where you would break away from your tribe. You would not share that food. That's no longer the best survival strategy. You would eat it all as fast as you could because you don't want your tribe to discover you eating it, and you don't want the predators who are gathering around to get you before you finished eating it. And so you would eat it as fast as you could, and then you would run away and hide. That's the description of binge eating disorder.
Yeah.
Binge eating disorder is just a woken up fear of famine brain. It's very sad. And you do that by dieting, not enough calories, and by fasting. Yeah. We do have good research showing that after even just 24 hours of fasting, the addictive part of the brain is hyperactivated. Fasting is not for people with processed food addiction.
Right. So,
Yeah.
Dr. Ifland, what's the real truth about weight loss?
The real truth about weight loss is that it is a severe, complicated addiction. And when you treat the addiction, the weight loss issue goes away.
Amen. Thank you so much, Dr. Ifland.
Thank you. Thank you, Chef AJ. You are a light in the world.
Oh,
You are a light in a very gray, dim world, and I appreciate you so much.
Oh, and the feeling is mutual. Thank you for your
Oh, thanks.